Okay guys, it's a D2 testing kind of day. Lionsteel SR-1A, Benchmade 275 Adamas. Come along as we put these babies through their paces. As you guys know, if you've been watching for very long, I'm having a bit of a love affair with D2 tool steel in knife blades lately. So I thought, since I had a rare Sunday afternoon without a huge chore list, I'd take the Lionsteel SR-1A and the Benchmade Adamas out to the wood pile and do a little testing, see if D2 really deserves the love that I give it. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut up some cardboard first, after I show you how the edges were before testing, and then we're going to go out and make some tent stakes. Let's see how German D2 and American D2 hold up under some pretty hard use. Baseline cut tests for the Lionsteel SR-1A and the Benchmade 275 Adamas. Let's start with the Adamas now. Remember guys, this is sharpened at a pretty obtuse angle. 36 and 46 inclusive, so 18 and 23 per side. And it's got sort of a high friction coating, but let's see what it can do on this phone book paper. Got a little catch in it. There we go. Not bad for a splitter. Now let's check out the Lionsteel. This my standard edge angle, 30 and 40 or 15 and 20. Let's see how this does. Really slick. Any way you want it. Okay, so we've got a great slicer, not such a great slicer, but still a real sharp knife. Now we're going to go abuse them. Well, not abuse them, we're going to use them like they were intended. We're going to cut some cardboard and then we're going to do a little wood processing. No, we're not going to baton them. See you soon. Okay guys, just sort of a basic cardboard cutting test. Just going to cut through small sections of the full length of this piece of double wall corrugated cardboard. Pretty heavy corrugated, also very dense. So let's see how the Adamas does. Got a fair amount of resistance with this pretty obtuse wedge-like grind and the BK1 coating. Knife is sharp. It's not a great slicer. That was sloppy. almost seems to be getting easier as I get to the end. Now let's take a look. There's some streaking on the coating. No apparent edge wear. Now let's take a look at the Lionsteel. Okay, I would expect this to cut a little slicker. Oh yeah. Well guys, grind and finish are everything. These aren't exactly the same D2. The Lionsteel is German D2. Got a little blue spot there. Getting kind of flimsy at the end. Well, I think the camera probably picked that up as well as my hands did. Much easier to cut cardboard with the SR-1A. Well, now let's go make some tent stakes. Okay guys, what we're going to do next is just stuff you would do with a large folding knife. Make some tent stakes. Let's say your cheap tent from Walmart, you made a stake into a pretzel, you needed to do a makeshift stake. Well, you need a pointy end and you need a notch. And you have to cut to length. So let's start by doing that. These two I've already done, one with each knife. I guess the Adamas probably a little better chopper. The better for fine work appears to be the Lionsteel, but let's see if that holds true. First, let's chop a couple steaks off to length. We'll start with the Lionsteel. Hanging a pinky off the end, kind of making some snap cuts. Try to get a good set on this base log. Okay. Now let's do the other end. I guess I'll just cut halfway through this with the Lionsteel and finish with the Benchmade. And now we'll cut the other end. I would still say the Adamas is a bit better chopper. Alright, let's bring our steak to a point. You know guys, for a pretty obtuse angle, we're making some pretty decent curls. Not a bad little whittler. Now let's cut a notch for our tent line. Not a bad notcher. Rolling up some curls, cutting them off. Pretty square notch, about 30%, 40% of the way through that stick. That stick's ready. Now let's try the Lionsteel. Okay. First we'll bring it to a point. Well, definitely cuts more readily than the Benchmade. Very little effort required. But, you know, I didn't sharpen these knives to perform the same. I sharpened the Adamas to be able to withstand more punishment. I sharpened the Lionsteel to be more of a cutter. Alright, let's put a notch in this thing for our tent line. Wow, pretty good job. Well, we've got now enough stakes to stake out our tent or our tarp if we didn't bring a tent. A little paracord and a section of tarp would make a shelter for the night. Both knives performed admirably. That one still has an edge. And so does that one. Let's go inside, clean them off, see how they cut, guys. Okay, guys, let's get these two blades cleaned up. Using a little Flitz gun and knife cleaner. Don't really know what's in it. It smells a little like Windex. Certainly not. Okay, so here's the Adamas. Interesting. Well, here will be my number one first complaint, Benchmade. I think the light will pick this up. This knife's a couple weeks old. It's made 2 tent stakes and cut some cardboard. How's that BK1 coating working for you? Can you say cold steel? I don't know if Benchmade has an issue with the manufacturer, the lab who makes DLC coating. I don't know what the deal is, but this proprietary BK1 coating is just fraught with problems. It gums up pivots, it makes locks sticky, and it doesn't last very well, does it? I think there might be a stripper bath in the future of this knife. We'll just have to see. How about blade play? Well, now we're back to what makes this knife this knife. Guys, I'm telling you, if I blindfolded you and handed you this knife and had you grab a hold of the tip and grab a hold of the handle without cutting yourself, of course, and made you guess after handling it whether you were holding a folder or a fixed blade, I don't think you could tell me. I really don't. There's no flex, there's no even minuscule blade play. If the axis lock bar engages the full, all the way. I would say the springs are a little weak for this much beef. Sometimes if there's a little bit of contamination on that blade tang ramp or on the axis lock bar itself, it'll have just a tiny bit of up and down play. But in general, very solid. No damage done by the chopping, of course. Now let's clean up the old Lionsteel. I would say one thing while we're wiping here. To piggyback on what I was just talking about, I don't think D2 per se requires coating. I've had my Benchmade 710 for, I don't know, 4 years. I haven't taken unbelievably anal care of it. I've never seen a spot on that knife. I think if you take D2 and you finish it to a pretty high polish, you know, a nice fine satin like this blade, you're never going to have any rust issues. I generally think coating, unless you're talking a plain carbon steel, causes more problems than it solves. Let me grab some paper, we'll see if they're sharp. Okay, first the Benchmade. No stropping or anything after a little wood processing. Let's see what we got. A little catchy. Well, it's trying. I think that's more me than the paper or the knife. Not as sharp as it was. You know, it still has a tactile edge. It's just not as smooth, I guess. Now remember, this thing didn't love to cut phone book paper in the first place. I don't know if I have enough clean edges left for the Lionsteel. Let's see. Let's make a clean edge. How's that? I'm going to get a fresh piece, guys. Okay, let's try this. Well, you know, I'm sharp at the tip. That's not really where I was working either. Oh, that's okay. All right. Much sharper at the tip than I am in the area where we were working, as you can see. So we're not quite phone book paper sharp with either one of these knives. What I'm going to do, no stone, just a strop. I'm going to run both blades through the strop and meet you back here and see what we got. Okay, we're strapped up. Edge feels pretty good on the Adamas. Let's see. It is pretty good. It might be a little sharper than it was before we started, at least for phone book paper. Whoops. Okay, you know, that's not bad for a 36 degree, I'm sorry, a 46 degree inclusive cutting edge. And let's look at the SR-1. Oh my, wow. One thing I didn't do, let's see if we have any blade play. Rock solid, guys. This high-performance Italian sports car of a knife apparently will take a little punishment. Let's see if it'll cut now. Whoops. Yeah, it's unbelievably sharp. Interesting little test, I think. All right, meet you back out on the deck, and we'll talk about these blades and D2 a little bit. Okay, guys, let me give you my impressions about what you've just seen. First of all, I did not intend this test to pit one knife against the other. We've got two very different applications for D2 steel, although both in relatively large-sized folding knives. The Adamas by Benchmade has a pretty steep, I guess I would call it a saber grind, a flat grind from about half the breadth of the blade down, terminating in a pretty thin behind the cutting edge profile. I've sharpened it 18 degrees per side for the secondary bevel and 23 per side for the micro bevel. I did so not to make a razor, but to make a good hard use cutter. Something you could chop with, hack with, pry with, dig with, and still maintain a good sharp working edge throughout all that without having to resharpen. I think we had that. You know, even when we were carving the tent line notch in the last tent stake, it was still making nice, good curls after cutting a whole bunch of cardboard, doing a little chopping. The Lionsteel, on the other hand, about the same blade thickness, maybe even a little thicker at the spine, but a big, long, almost full flat grind, and sharpened at 15 degrees per side for the secondary bevel and 20 degrees per side for the micro. I did sharpen this knife to be a vicious cutter. But did it still hold up well to hard use? I would say that it did. Interesting little comparison, although it's not direct, between the German D2 and the American D2. I think both performed well. Frankly, I expected the German D2 to perform a little better than it did. I kind of expected it to still be razor sharp even in the area that we did the cutting after the test, but it did require a stropping before it came back. Benchmade's American D2 really performed about the same way, with albeit with a thicker, more obtuse grind. An interesting note, I think, is that this Adamas has a much beefier pivot and a much beefier stop pin than the Lionsteel does. And I don't know if you extended this test to a torture test kind of duration, whether the mechanism in the Lionsteel would hold up as well as the Benchmade. But guys, this is no safe queen. I was actually kind of impressed with its chopping ability too. It's a lot less massive knife than this one, but I think because of its thinner grind, even being lighter, it still bit pretty good into the wood. Some of you who have watched my channel may be wondering, wow, when you did that hard use test with the Cold Steel Recon 1 in AUS 8A, it actually had a better edge when that test was over than either one of these two D2 knives. Well, before you draw any conclusions from that, I would caution you of one thing. The Recon 1 had to cut cardboard about the same amount as these two knives did, and then it batoned. It split wood. So it's not really cutting across wood fibers. It's making an initial bite into the wood, and then the shoulders of the knife, this area, are doing all the work. The cutting edge really isn't doing a whole lot as it splits the log. In this test, we did a lot more cutting through wood fibers, putting points on these tent stakes and notching them. You know, there's a lot of actual cutting going on. And then the chopping itself. I don't know if I've got a... You know, here's a chopped end that we did in this testing. A lot more strain, a lot more wear on a cutting edge going through this kind of wood processing than splitting. You know, the batoning is great for evaluating the mechanism, but this test actually made it harder on the edge for cutting. I would say that when you can cut up a bunch of cardboard, chop up some wood, carve some wood with a knife blade, and all it requires to be razor sharp, phone book paper sharp is a little stropping, that's a pretty good steel. No damage was done to either cutting edge. There really weren't any tactile nicks or cracks or chips in either blade. Both knives, for large sort of heavy duty folders, I think did very well. And the beauty of D2, once again, is not only its good edge holding and pretty good durability, but how quickly it brings back that razor edge. And guys, this knife might be sharper now than it was before I started the test. And the Adamas also. Maybe not the Adamas. It's close. One disappointment, though, as I said at the bench, was how this coating is not holding up very well. I think I'm going to try to strip this blade and the pocket clip as well. Well, that's it for fun with knives on a Sunday afternoon. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, guys, the Word and my D2 knives are sharp.